We're back again reviewing the biggest transfer news of the week, including Benjamin Sesko's decision, Tyler Dibling going to Everton, Marc Casado leaving Barcelona, Rodrygo to Spurs, Garnacho to Chelsea, Donnarumma and Isak's future. There's so much to get into. Let's have it. Let's start with Tyler Dibling's future then, because a couple of bids have gone in from Everton this week. Clearly very keen to get more senior players over the line following David Moyes' comments in pre-season that he's worried about the squad, worried about the lack of transfer business. They've returned their attention to Tyler Dibling, who's still very young, still very raw. But Southampton wants so much money. I think Everton's first offer of around £35 million was totally fair enough. £35 million plus add-ons based on his performance. Southampton reportedly want £50 million for the player. Now, I look at the market and the way it shifted this summer, and certainly £50 million feels like the going rate for a top-quality winger. You know, some of the players we've seen move for similar fees to that include the likes of Jamie Gittins, Anthony Elanga, both of which are far more established than Tyler Dibling. Now, he certainly has some really strong aspects to his game, noticeably his dribbling. You know, 2.16 dribbles per 90, he's in the top 80 percentile of forwards. So he's very strong on the ball when he's carrying the ball over distance. He wins a lot of fouls. He profiles similarly to Jack Grealish. But I think for £50 million, 1,800 minutes of football with this output, I think is a big risk. You know, these numbers, from a shooting perspective, from an actual output perspective, just haven't been proved yet. He certainly could be a superstar, but I just wonder if it's a little bit early for a player who's putting up, 0.1 expected goals per 90 to move for £50 million to a big club like Everton, moving into a brand new stadium. I think it's a lot to ask. It's a lot of money. I actually think it's unrealistic. I'm not sure Southampton are going to get £50 million for Tyler Dibling. I think the expectation needs to be lowered a little bit. If it could be agreed around that £40 million mark, I think it's a much more realistic move and would actually be a good signing for Everton. But at £50 million, I just think it's a huge risk. I like the player a lot. It's just so much money. How about Marc Casado and his future? Because according to reports in Spain, he could leave Barcelona this summer for as low as €30 million, which would be a huge surprise to everyone, I think. Obviously, a Barcelona native, he said openly that he wants to stay at Barcelona for his entire career. Had an excellent season last year for a 21-year-old in that Barcelona midfield before the injury. I loved his combativeness. I thought his passing range was excellent. Super aggressive off the ball. But Barcelona might be willing to cash in because of the financial issues they face. They still can't register Marcus Rashford. Frankie de Jong is expected to play a more key role this summer. I think particularly back to one fixture I really like Marc Casado in, and that was against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. His competitiveness, his drive and desire to win the ball back in midfield was amazing for a 21-year-old of his stature. He was out there competing. But also season-wide, you look at his pass numbers, I think really, really excellent in transition. His progressive passes are excellent. Huge volume of successful passes as well. Only 8 players in the Barcelona squad put up more minutes than Marc Casado last season. Only one of them was a midfielder, and that was Pedri. So I think he was pretty relied upon. His passing is excellent. He's super combative off the ball. Really good interception numbers in the top 70 percentile. At £26 million, this feels like a bargain. And the team being linked to him are Spurs. Now, if Spurs could get this over the line at £26 million, I think no doubt this would be a good signing. I know João Palhinha has just come in on loan, but totally other end of his career, 30 years old. Casado offers a far better passing option from deep midfield. I still don't believe Barca are going to let him go. If I'm honest, this feels like a negotiating tactic, maybe over a new contract. Because yes, Frankie de Jong is expected to come back and have an impact this season, but his injury history suggests he can't be relied upon. And people might talk about Marc Bernal playing in there. Can Casado offer an option at fullback? But if he is available, Casado, more teams must be interested. I'm sure teams across Spain, the likes of Real Betis, will be interested. I mean, Manchester United, looking potentially for a number 6 that's younger, combative, and can progress the ball. Casado feels like an excellent option in there. If somebody can get him for €30 million, it's brilliant business. Victor John is on the verge of joining West Ham. Clearly, they are looking for a goalkeeper and have been for some time. Lucas Fabianski didn't renew his contract. I don't think there's an overall trust in Areola's game, so they've gone for a new number one. It's expected that is going to be Victor John for around 10 million euros coming in from Botafogo. He had an amazing Club World Cup. I think anybody who watched Botafogo at the Club World Cup will have been impressed by his stature, by his shot stopping, 84% save percentage at the Club World Cup, backing up an 82% save percentage across the Brazilian League season. Copa Libertadores winner in 2024, Brazilian League title for the first time in 20 years at Botafogo. He's had an impact there. But it's a big step up from the Brazilian League at 29 years old to the Premier League. And I think it is a little bit of a risk to ask him to come in and have an impact without having any pre-season. I'm going to say it's an okay move. I've seen a few highlight packages of him that worry me a little bit on the ball and a couple of mistakes he's made, but I would be willing to give him time because the fee feels very, very low. Back to Everton, let's talk Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. You guys might well have seen this official by the time this video goes out. It certainly feels like it's all but done. £25 million up front with a further £3 or £4 million in add-ons. I think he's a really good fee for Chelsea. By the way, this is a player who played 250 minutes of Premier League football. They bought him in for £30 million and they've sold him for £29 million. Now, he didn't have a great season last year. He didn't play enough minutes, but he was pretty effective in the Conference League. Overall, the value of that transfer doesn't look great though, does it, on paper? £5 million in wages, over £3 million in agent fees, £5 million worth of cash loss for 250 minutes. I think that's like 50k, 55k a minute he was on the field. But let's forget the money for 1 second and talk about his fit at Everton, because certainly, like I said, Tyler Dibling, Everton need bodies, particularly in midfield areas. Idrissa Guehi, Timo Werner, Jimmy Garner and Carlos Alcaraz, I think, are the main senior midfielders. Clearly not enough. I think it's 14 or 15 senior outfield players they've got on their books at the moment. And I really like Dewsbury Hall's fit for this Everton team. I think they needed some creativity in that midfield area. I think they needed a player who can get on the ball and drive it forward a little bit more. And that is what Dewsbury Hall offers. If we could just roll the clock back a second to his performance in Leicester's Championship season, where he was absolutely superb, 30 goal involvements from midfield. We're looking at a profile of a midfielder who got loads of shots off, created loads of chances. His non-penalty expected goals was around 0.2 per 90. Really, really impressive. His expected assists were at 0.3. So we're talking about a player who was providing a goal every other game from midfield. He's in the top 3 or 4% of European midfielders for his shot creating action. So he can create from deep, he can drive with the ball, wins a lot of fouls, he's very neat and tidy in possession, he's homegrown, the fee isn't ridiculous, he's still only 25 years old. I really like this move. I really do like this move. I'm going to put it straight in good signing. I don't see any downside to it. How about Leslie Ugochukwu going to Burnley? This seems like it's a permanent deal, around about £20 million. I think that fee is fine. He didn't have an outstanding season at Southampton, but Burnley needed midfield cover, specifically because Josh Brownhill never signed his contract, so there were midfielders short in there. And I think they were short of physicality as well. You look at some of the signings, they're quite small in stature. Not a lot of midfield cover has been provided so far this season. And Ugochukwu certainly provides the physicality required. At 21 years old, he has a really high ceiling, 6'3", an excellent ball carrier. I think it's a little bit surprising he's been allowed to leave on a permanent deal, but the way Chelsea have set up in midfield is much more technical than it is physical, and I think Ugochukwu wants to drive with the ball, he wants to show his physical prowess in the middle of the park. I'd be slightly worried from his perspective about going to Burnley. Does anybody at home see Burnley surviving? And is this going to be back-to-back relocations for a player who 18 months ago was one of the most highly coveted young central midfielders in Europe? He looked like he had a huge ceiling. Again, though, I just think the fee is decent for Burnley, and this could have a really positive upswing. Again, there's very little downside to signing a 21-year-old who had a massively high ceiling a couple of years ago, who is really going to provide physical balance to the midfield. I'm pretty positive about this one. West Ham are reportedly interested in Raheem Sterling. West Ham fans, what are your thoughts so far on this window? When I look at it as a whole, I'm a little bit indifferent, to be honest with you. I would be a little bit disappointed with the speed you've moved and the support that's been given to Graham Potter. As for Raheem Sterling, I think it will be okay if the wages are right. Obviously, he's earning a huge amount at Chelsea now. He'd have to take a wage cut to join West Ham, but he is still only 30 years old, and I do think forward cover is needed. Support for Jarrod Bowen and Nicholas Füllkrug is desperately required. He had a terrible season at Arsenal last year. There was little to no impact made on the field. I think he himself would admit it was really disappointing. To have started just 7 games for Arsenal when they had serious problems in the wide areas, specifically injury to Bukayo Saka, not good enough, is it? And I do think it would be a risk to bring him to West Ham. If it doesn't work and the wages are large and he's on a long contract, I think the downside here is pretty large. I think especially West Ham fans will be a little bit disappointed there isn't more creativity being shown in the market when some of the options in Europe, in wide areas, seemingly have slipped through the net or have joined clubs that are of a lower stature of West Ham, don't have the support, the fan base, the stadium, or the stature of the club. You know, when I think about West Ham arriving into this season, and you look at the numbers they had last season, Jarrod Bowen scored 13 goals. I think the second top scorer was Thomas Souček. In terms of creativity, Jarrod Bowen put up 8 assists. Behind him, I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka put up 5. So the numbers were really low from a creative goal-scoring standpoint. They haven't really improved on that. Raheem Sterling would maybe go some way to doing that, but it feels like we haven't got the proof of that over the last 18 months. They just haven't been there, those numbers. And so far this summer, West Ham have added, Callum Wilson, who hasn't scored enough goals in the last 18 months, mainly due to injury, and a lot of defenders. I really like the Juve move. I think he's looked excellent in pre-season. I like the Kyle Walker-Peters signing, but where's the creativity? Where's the replacement for Mo Kudus' driving power and ability in midfield? West Ham, I'm a bit worried about them in forward areas so far. Could Conor Gallagher be on his way to Tottenham Hotspur? This comes off the back of the news, really tragic news actually, about James Maddison's knee injury. Feel so sorry for him. Injury hit career continues. But let's talk about this number 10 space, because it feels like it's getting pretty desperate for Tottenham to sign a number 10 as they approach this new season with Maddison injured, Kulusevski injured, Kudus looking like he's potentially going to play wide. Who's going to play in that number 10 position? I think going into the season, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were thinking, wow, Kudus can play 10, Maddison can play 10, Bergvall can play in that advanced area, Gibbs White's about to come through the door, can play in the 10. Now they look thin there. So could Conor Gallagher offer an option in the number 10? Well, I don't think he is a traditional 10 in the sense of James Maddison or how we've seen traditional 10s be used under Thomas Frank. You know, he's not a Nickel Damsgaard. He's not that sort of ethereal presence who's going to create loads of chances like a Maddison, like a Damsgaard. He's much more of a hard-working, advanced 8 that can attack the box late. You know, his touches in the penalty area for Atletico Madrid under Diego Simeone last season ranked in the top 5% of European attacking midfielders. So he can get in the box, but he can also play deep, and he's a bit more of a dog off the ball. I wonder, though, is that not just a very similar profile to Lucas Bergvall, who can carry the ball up and down the pitch, can play as an advanced 8, and for me is an outstanding player, one of the best young central midfielders in Europe. So I would probably put this move in okay, because I think Atletico would want a sizable fee. They want to recoup a lot of the money they paid for him just last summer. I'm sure Connor would be pretty open to coming back, living in London, and I do believe, you know, he would improve Spurs as a squad. But in that number 10, what Spurs are looking for, which is real creativity from the 10, I don't know whether stylistically and profile it's the best fit. Spurs fans, would you be happy with bringing Conor Gallagher into that 10 role to replace James Maddison? I think there's a couple of question marks for me. They're not just linked with Gallagher, though. They're also linked with Randall, Kolo, Muani. A big move this potentially could be, a loan with an option or an obligation to buy. We've seen Spurs act in that way already this summer with the move for João Palhinha. But again, I would have question marks about the Kolo Muani transfer. With Richarlison still there, Matthias Tell still there, Solanke still there, is Kolo Muani the ideal replacement for Son? Now, Son probably does need replacing, but I do think Kolo Muani profiles very similarly to a Matthias Tell, who can offer on the left, but also play in that number 9 role, is excellent in wide spaces when he's using his physicality to run in behind. He was superb in that 6-month stint at Juventus. Across the second half of the season, he scored 8 goals. That was the second most in that period of any striker in Serie A. I think only Rodrygo put up more than him, and he's been shipped off to Saudi now. But also, highest percentage of shots on target, best conversion rate, biggest XG over performer. So I think he dispelled a few narratives about his finishing when he was at Juventus. At 30 million euros, the fee is good, and I'm surprised more clubs aren't interested in Kolo Muani. I think he's actually a really underrated player. But for Spurs, with Richarlison, with Mateta that can play similar roles, I'm not sure about the fit. I think it would be okay. I don't think it would blow me away. Arsenal look like they are going to ship off Fabio Vieira. Not a huge surprise, but a bid has come in from Stuttgart. He had an okay season in Porto. Really, really creative as a footballer. But in that role, Ødegaard, Saka, Wanyeri, Max Daumann, I don't see where Fabio Vieira possibly gets minutes next season. It feels like physically he's not quite right for the Premier League, and that does happen to some players. Some players are excellent on the continent, in the Portuguese league, in Spain. As soon as they come to the Prem, the physicality is just a totally different level. But he has the technical ability, as he proved at Porto, with some excellent numbers from shot creating actions to dribble completion percentage in tight spaces. He proved he can do it in Europe. And it's not a huge surprise to me Stuttgart have come in for him. You look at them last season, and obviously Demirovic and Voltemada scored a lot of goals, 31 between them. But creatively, there wasn't a huge amount of creativity from midfield. Angelo Stiller, I think, put up the most assists last season. But in terms of expected assists and shot creating actions, only one player in the entire squad put up over 5 expected assists last season, and that was Angelo Stiller, a lot of them coming from set pieces. So they want some creativity. Fabio Vieira is still a good age, I think 24, 25, and feels like an undervalued asset. There's a lot of this sort of player at Premier League clubs that just haven't really been given the chance and haven't really developed into the role. I think Fabio Vieira, again, there's a lot of players in here I think would be okay. I don't think they'd rip up trees for me, but I like Fabio Vieira. Come on then, let's talk about it. Big Ben Sesko. Would you believe it? Manchester United. Ben Sesko going Man United. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I did a whole video last week on whether or not Sesko should choose Newcastle or Manchester United. If you haven't watched that already, I suggest you go and watch that now, because I came down on the fence of I thought he should have gone to Newcastle. I'm really interested to hear what you guys would have done. But it appears he has picked Manchester United. Fine. Is it the right fit for United? Well, I do believe United needed a number 9. However, I personally would have spent big funds, because this is huge, huge money. I personally would have spent the big money in midfield. I know that Højlund didn't hit the heights, neither did Xerxes last season, but that's £100 million worth of player there that you're effectively writing off after 18 months. And the midfield dynamic, as we've seen in pre-season, still feels clunky. Bruno and Kobe, I think, are excellent footballers, but they don't have a partner. I don't think Casemiro has a long-term future at the club, and Ugarte still very questionable in possession. United need an athletic, ball-dominant, first-phase midfielder who can pick the ball up, drive it, pick the ball up, pass it, and win out of possession. That is a big problem for Manchester United. The build-up structure from the back. Obviously, goals were a big problem last season too. Didn't score anywhere near enough and haven't scored anywhere near enough for the last 2 or 3 seasons. Sesko is going to go some way to quell that. We can point to the fact he scored 21 goals in all competitions, 13 in 30 starts last season, about 2,300 minutes. But per 90, his numbers still represent a risk, in my opinion. You know, his expected goals still in that sort of middle percentile. His shots still in that middle percentile. He's not a shot volume monster, 2.5 per 90. It's not the 3 or 4 we're talking about from some of Europe's most elite strikers, but he is still just 22. That part of his game has to develop. It's a big risk as to whether it will develop at Manchester United. We've seen plenty of elite talents join United in recent years. Very few, if any, have gone on to be successful. Now, that's not me saying I think Sesko will be a failure at Manchester United. I actually think there's a big chance he's a major success, partially because Cunha and Burmo arrived with Premier League qualities to offset the pressure on goals, but also partly because he feels like a big personality. He feels like he has a real ego that he can perform, and I think that's a very, very positive thing for a Manchester United striker. Overall, I'm a bit shocked. I don't understand where the money's come from. Where have United managed to find 85 million euros? That's a crazy amount of cash. But either way, he's going to be a Manchester United player, so you have to put it in good signing. Last week, I had it in unrealistic. I didn't believe it. Now it's in good signing. Bournemouth have reportedly sent a €30 million offer to Sevilla for Loic Baldé. He hasn't necessarily accepted that move. It seems like this is still very much in flux. A lot of clubs are interested in Baldé, be it Leverkusen or Sunderland. Other European sides want him as well. Let's focus on Bournemouth though. They obviously want to bring another centre-back. They've lost Dean Howson, they've lost Kirkes, they've lost Kepa. They've got Zabani still at the club, just feels likely he's going to join PSG though. And they've got Marco Senesi, a player who I think people are sleeping on. What you get from Baldé though is real athleticism, a player who wants to step out the line, who wants to carry the ball. Stylistically, he feels a little bit more similar to a Dean Howson. His duel numbers are really, really impressive, as are his successful dribbles. When he steps out the line, he can progress the ball very, very well. Overall, as a package, at 30 million euros, there's a lot to like about Loic Baldé. He's still only 25 years old. As I've spoken about a lot throughout this video, I feel like there's a big upswing potential to this transfer. He could become a star, and at 30 million euros, it doesn't feel like there's a catastrophic downside. When you add that to the fact Bournemouth are crying out for that centre-back position, like I said, I'm going to put this in good signing. Overall, the move feels like it fits nicely. I actually think it's one of Baldé's better options. Certainly better option than a club like Sunderland. And, you know, Leverkusen, I think there are question marks over that project right now. Douglas Luiz looks like he's closing in on a move to Nottingham Forest. It's ended terribly at Juventus, refusing to get on the bus, fined. It's all gone wrong there. I don't think the move ever really worked. He didn't get enough opportunities last season, didn't play well when he did get the opportunities. But he does have a history in the Premier League of being really, really successful. And again, I like the fit to Forest. With Danilo leaving the club, the midfield options are Sangare, Ryan Yates, Dominguez, and obviously Elliot Anderson. I think Sangare's injury record would worry me. You know, he spent, 150 days out injured last season. Ryan Yates, very, very consistent performer, as is Dominguez. Elliot Anderson is the star in that midfield, though. So when you have just three midfield options and an injured or an injury-prone Sangare, the opportunity to bring in some experience, like Douglas Luiz, who is not over the hill, an excellent passer, somebody with a wicked set-piece delivery, who, when he left Aston Villa, was being touted with clubs like Arsenal, and that was only 12 months ago. Again, I think a loan with an obligation to buy here, what's the downside? Forest would be getting a really solid Premier League option, and if it didn't work, he could go back to Juventus. This is a good move. Forest fans, talk to me what you think about your window so far. You've obviously lost Elanga, but you managed to keep Gibbs White on the contract. If Douglas Luiz arrives, it's another positive. I think it's looking okay. Arsenal have reportedly rejected an approach from Porto for Jakub Kivior, an underrated defender. By the way, I think it's hard to find left-footed centre-backs that are calm and composed in possession, whilst also being willing to defend as just an out-and-out block, get your head in front of the ball like Kivior. Now, I don't think he's probably got a long-term future at Arsenal. I think the arrival of Christian Mosquera really throws that into question. The fact that Calafiori can play as a left-sided centre-back as well means he drops right down the pecking order. To be honest with you, again, I think this would be an okay move. I just think that Kivior is fine. You know, the fact that he can't break into this Arsenal backline over Gabriel and Saliba is no disrespect. That's maybe the best central defensive unit in Europe, a contender for the throne anyway. Christian Mosquera arrives as one of the most highly sought after young centre-backs. Calafiori offers cover in two different roles. Kivior's fine. I don't think we should disrespect him. And I think as an option for Porto, he represents decent value. Jean-Philippe Mateta is still the subject of interest. Prolonged interest at this stage from Atalanta. Now, they had a bid rejected. Reportedly, they're going to go back into the tune of about 45 million euros. They're in the hunt for a number 9 themselves after losing Retegui, so they've got a bit of money in the bank. I don't know whether I would select Atalanta personally just because of the transition post-Gasperini. Like, is Ivan Juric going to be the guy? I don't really think so. Palace can't afford to lose him. They just can't afford to lose him. You know, we've seen Glasner's comments recently about the lack of transfer business, not being happy about it affecting the start of the season, and it's totally fair enough. They haven't done enough business. Guehi's probably going to leave late in the window. We'll talk about him in a minute. Eberechi Eze's future, still question marks over that one. I'm putting this in what? I just do not believe Palace can lose Mateta. If they did, I would be going, what are they doing? I think even at like £50 million, they have to say no to this move. Johan Visser to Newcastle is still a struggle, isn't it? It's still a struggle, obviously. I still think it would be a good signing. I think he's an excellent player. 19 non-penalty goals last season proves that out. His athleticism works for Newcastle. Even at £40 million, I think this is a good signing. I don't see 29-year-olds being write-offs over the hill like some people. And I think Brentford have to drop that asking price at some stage, because otherwise they're going to have a player who's unhappy, fans who don't want the player, and a 29-year-old who at this stage of his career wants to play Champions League football, which is totally fair enough. You know, he's watched Mbeumo leave, Norgard leave, Thomas Frank leave, and they haven't really signed a player or players of that stature to replace them. So from Visser's point of view, I can see why he wants out. Mark Guehi is the subject of renewed interest from Newcastle. This one went very quiet. £75 million bids. Let's not forget that. £75 million bids were going in for him last season from the Toon. They're going to have to go back in for him. I still think they're desperate for a centre-back. Botman's injury record is checkered, and that's kind. I don't see Burn being able to play there for a full season yet again. Fabian Schär is coming towards the end of his career as well. Guehi is the best option on the market by an absolute mile. Even at £45 million, a 24-year-old, 25-year-old centre-back with multiple England caps, who's the best player for England, by the way, at the Euros recently, who's the captain of Palace, is extremely fit, never ever injured, has played in a 3 and a 4, very two-footed, composed on the ball. Tell me a downside. Tell me one downside to signing Guehi. I don't see it. Spurs have reportedly renewed their interest in Rodrygo. I'm trying not to laugh at this one, but this is unrealistic. Surely. There's no way Rodrygo's going to end up at Spurs. The chat about his future has gone a little bit quiet. I still think he himself is desperate to remain at Real Madrid. Tottenham maybe do need a left winger because Son has left the club, and I was speaking about that earlier as an out-and-out left winger rather than a Kolo Muani type who can play as a left winger or a striker like Tell, like Richarlison. Could they add an out-and-out winger, somebody to compete with Wilson Odobert out there? And is that Rodrygo? I don't see it. I don't see it. I think the wages would be absolutely astronomical. The fee would be monstrous to start with, and then you've got to convince him to come to Spurs, who, yes, are playing in the Champions League, but as a project is a massive step down from Real Madrid. Overall, I mean, Spurs fans, talk to me. Rodrygo, you'd obviously have him. I think he'd be an amazing pickup, but surely this one doesn't happen. One move that I think will happen, though, is Garnacho. I think he is going to go to Chelsea. I think this is a matter of time. It's a matter of fee. Chelsea fully know the longer this goes on, the cheaper he goes for. He's not going to play for this club again, Manchester United. I don't see any world in which that happens. However, there is a fee which Manchester United cannot afford to let this go below. You know, United can't be talking 35, 40 million pounds for this player. United can't be looking for a similar fee as Southampton are looking for Dibling. You know, Garnacho, across the last 3 seasons, yes, he had a poor season last year, but across the last 3 seasons has proven he could be a Premier League level winger. He's scored multiple big goals in big games, superb goals. His goal scoring and his assist output dwarf a player like Tyler Dibling. He's still extremely young, and United have got to be careful here that they don't underplay their hand. Yes, they might lose out on cash, but there's just no way in hell he can leave for 30, 35 million pounds, which is reportedly anyway what Chelsea value him at. I think this will get done, maybe on deadline day, and I think it'd be a really good move for Chelsea. I think it is a better starting option than Gittins, and to be honest with you, he's an undervalued asset in this market, so I think it's a good move, but from United's perspective, the money's got to be right. Alexander Isak's move to Liverpool feels like it stalled a little bit. Reports were saying that his agent was at Anfield. Whether or not they're true, I'm not sure. Overall, obviously, this every time we speak about it has to be in OMG. £110 million bid rejected. that is, I think, a bit of a derisory bid. I think he's worth way more than £110 million in a market like this. In a market where, Benjamin Sesko's going €90 million. Alexander Isak, who's proven he can score over 20 Premier League goals comfortably in this league for a Newcastle side, I think he's a £130 million player at bare minimum. Now, if he goes to Liverpool, bust the league, I think genuinely this could be a league buster. But do I actually see this happening? If it does, I think it goes to deadline day. I think it goes really, really late in the window. He himself must be furious with how this was played out. But I also feel like he's left it quite late. Am I wrong in thinking that I was a little bit surprised and still am a little bit surprised about the timing of him refusing to train and going to Spain and not going on the preseason tour and saying, he does want to leave after Arsenal had moved for Gyökeres and Chelsea had signed 2 strikers and Liverpool had bought in Ekitike. I think he's a fabulous player, and if he goes to Liverpool, we'll quickly do Donnarumma. I still think this is unrealistic to Manchester United. The rumours persist. £30 million fee, reportedly, PSG are looking for. They've obviously bought in Chevalier, but it's the wages. He's reportedly on £12 million a year. He would probably want an increase in that if he was to go to Manchester United, who are in a really below par position comparatively to PSG. He'd want an agent fee that is monstrous. He'd want a signing on bonus. Manchester United, do they have the money to do that when they've already got Onana on the books and it doesn't feel like he's shiftable? It doesn't feel like clubs are clamouring for Andre Onana, so maybe Bayanda would leave. Donnarumma would come in as the number 1. Onana would go to 2. Overall, the finances involved in the Donnarumma move, the convincing of him joining United's project, doesn't feel possible to me. Throughout this video, by the way, I was using FOTMob for all of the statistics. If you hadn't noticed already, that is my favourite app. I use it for all of my goal updates, my fixtures, my stats. Click the link in the top of the description right now to get it. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.